Hi, everybody, and welcome to the next panel on culture and content, inspirations for change. My name is Juliane Schulze, and I was consultant to the Green Screen project, so it's a big honor for me to share the session and to present to you our expert panel. Let me start by introducing Melanie Dix, founder and chief executive at Fingerprint Content, an international production company formed with partners Jess Hines, Leah Walton, and former US Secretary of State John Kerry, special presidential envoy for climate, as a way to empower the world's most exciting storytellers to bring their deeply held passion for life, exploring inequality, race, and gender, the power of big business, and most particularly climate change in a thought-provoking and engaging way. Melanie founded Greenshoot in 2008, the first company of its kind to mobilize the audiovisual industry, offering practical support to help demystify, assist, and instruct in sustainability, carbon reduction, and offsetting. Melanie is also the architect, designer, and lead auditor for Green Screen, created in partnership with Film London, now used in over 24 countries. Awesome to have you with us. Lovely. And here they come. Fantastic. A very warm welcome to Alvaro Longoria. Finally, we see each other. It was about time. Alvaro is producer, director, and founding partner of Morena Films. Alvaro directed 2 documentaries in collaboration with Greenpeace, Esperanza, about the Save the Arctic campaign, and Sanctuary, produced and starred by Javier Bardem, about the campaign to create a marine sanctuary in Antarctica. Again, it was quite cold, I believe. As president of the European Producers Club, he led the Green Shooting Charter in 2018, now signed by more than 100 producers and production organizations. And another very warm welcome to Lucy Tremolier, who is a writer, director, and performer whose work questions how our stories are transformed by the presence of the climate crisis. She developed several projects across screen and stage, drama and comedy, while also having a more theoretical approach of the subject through workshops, discussion circles, and publications. And finally, Patrick Hawke, welcome to you and great you are joining us. Patrick is an artist, Irish artist, living and working in London, incorporating moving image, photography, and installation. Hawke's work excavates the increasingly entangled nature of archaeology, I'm not going to make it, archaeological, geological, and ecological worlds. And his recent exhibition include The Black River of Herself, exhibited at the Northern Gallery for Contemporary Art in the UK, and the Museum of Ancient History, UCD Classical Museum in Ireland. He is a recipient of the 2017 Gerbert FVU Award. A very, very warm welcome to all of you. It's sunny in Berlin. Awesome to see you. And I like to kickstart our round of questions with Melanie. You did a fireside chat with John Kerry, who is very, very aware of the link between politics, culture, and storytelling. It was about 18 months ago that you guys met. And he said, we are not moving people fast enough, and that sustainability got to enter into the daily currency of entertainment. You just returned from shooting in India, where Fingerprint Content is kicking off a series of format shows. Now, tell us how Fingerprint creates its narratives to contribute to achieving this goal. How do you go about that?
Hi, it's great to be here. Sorry, I was a bit late. I was struggling to get into the stage. But yes, we've just got back from India and had an amazing time out there. I guess we chose India for a couple of reasons, actually. Firstly, our mandate at Fingerprint Content is to find those stories that will engage the broadest audience, along with a core focus on climate. And these are the stories that need to be told by storytellers who need to be heard, as we know. And it was very interesting listening to Andy and his keynote about doom-laden content. And that is just not what Fingerprint or my team are about. We're about finding the broadest way to engage as many people as possible. And in terms of India, my partner Jess Hines has a long history working in India with great creators and inspirational people who are actively making changes and producing solutions to help in the fight against global warming. Now, our stories may emanate from many countries, but they all have universal themes to engage and entertain audiences. And with John and the team, we're kind of working on several projects. 7 Cities is based in India, fast-paced eco-action thriller starring the iconic actor Amitabh Bachchan, written by the award-winning writer Piyush Gupta, who wrote India's biggest-selling feature film, Dangal. And 7 Cities is a Fingerprint original moving into production next year and will be produced by Fingerprint team. And our newest member of the team, Shanal Balam, who has joined us having produced some of India's most successful films, and one of my favorites, the iconic Lunchbox. And Raj at War, a story of the untold muleteers in India who had a significant effect and contribution on World War II. And they used their fighting skills to outwit the German army. And it's an outstanding returning series. So we have several international themes on the slate. And I guess most recently, having been in India, Defenders of Planet Earth is our kind of heroic show that you will find on the Interreg platform at the moment screening, and I'd love everybody to have a look at it. And it's a show that celebrates ordinary people doing extraordinary things in the fight against climate change. Inspirational stories of everyday superheroes taking action in their area, focusing initially on India, but with plans to feature heroes from other countries all around the world. And we're currently very, very busy recruiting more and more people to join our Defenders of Planet Earth. So we have a really core remit, and it is obviously international, but very, very focused on changing that cultural dial, because people switch off when you talk about climate. So we're talking about the normal people on the ground and how we can affect change through culture and through our storytelling as producers.
Very interesting. And as you mentioned, these stories are embedded in the Indian culture. They come from India. They are basically codes that Indian audiences understand. And they seem to also be interactive, right?
Yes, that's correct. Yes, it's very important that we engage not just the sort of normal viewer, but people outside those areas. So both 7 Cities and Defenders of Planet Earth will be directed to mobile phones, but interactive. And very importantly for the team at Fingerprint, and especially for Jess and myself, is about impact campaigning. So of course the content is beautiful, engaging, commercially driven, but also it's impactful in terms of what the legacy we leave behind as filmmakers. And culturally that's very relevant in terms of switching and changing that dial in terms of how we do it. And also, having been the kind of architect of green screen and the designer and the founder of Greenshoot, what's critically important for me personally is the next generation of filmmakers and how we make content sustainably. So in front of the camera, what's the impact, but what's the legacy at the back for the next generation? So we can balance our content both in front of and behind the screen.
Awesome. This is really exciting. Thank you very much, Melanie. Alvaro, in 2019, you produced and directed the documentary film Sanctuary that follows through the eyes of Javier Bardem, the story of an ambitious environmental protection initiative to create the world's largest marine sanctuary in the Antarctic Ocean. This is really astonishing. And both the Bardem brothers strongly supported the film's social media campaign. Can you tell us a little bit more about the campaign and its outcomes, and how the documentaries you did in collaboration with Greenpeace influenced the work you are doing now? In other words, is the climate change and the sustainability agenda something that remains strong on your radar?
Well, that was my second film with Greenpeace. The first one I did called Esperanza focused mainly on the people at Greenpeace and those people working in the organization and how they risk their lives and all that. But then that had, some limited impact. So we decided to turn the camera around and use the power of celebrities in our favor, no? It's not something that Greenpeace has done many times in the past. In fact, the strategy of Greenpeace changed recently to incorporate these ambassadors. And Javier was great to join as an ambassador. And this was not only the trip to Antarctica, but we continued the campaign for most of the year until the resolution of the sanctuary. It was interesting to use the social networks because Javier did not have any. So when we started the film, he was not present in any of the social networks. He was very reluctant. So, but we decided we said, look, Javier, we have to do it. You have to do it. And he said, okay, let's do it. And so essentially he learned a lot, and it was very interesting to see how the followers were increasing, how we learned how to use the networks in our favor. We were broadcasting essentially from Antarctica nearly every day, and that made it very exciting for people on the social networks because they were seeing what was going on live, and that's something that gives a little bit more of a reality check. It's not only a documentary of what happened, but this is just happening. Our goal in the campaign was to reach 1.5 million subscribers, supporters for the campaign, and we were very much exceeded that. I think it was more than 3 million people who signed up for the campaign, which also I thought was interesting to see, how even if you have the public support, even if you have the public opinion, even if you use the social networks, sometimes that is not enough. So, I mean, as you all may know, or you will know now, the Marine Sanctuary in Antarctica was not approved, despite the fact that the huge campaign was undergone. And that essentially made Greenpeace take a more aggressive approach towards sea protection. And they went for a larger campaign that is currently going on, looking to protect 30% of the high seas. So it was all very, very exciting, a great learning opportunity for all of us, for Javier as well. And really we could see how it was very exciting to see how people were joining on a daily basis. And we really thought we had it because we had this huge publicity campaign, and we had millions of supporters, and we had governments, the UK government, the Spanish government, European Union, the US, all the big players had it. But the one problem was that this has to be in a consensus. Every country has to approve. And 3 countries, Denmark, China, and Russia, opposed the sanctuary, and there's nothing to do. I mean, we had to essentially just, we tried.
Yeah, I mean, what an amazing job, and how disappointing that then ultimately it didn't come through. But based on this experience that you had and this ability to actually mobilize masses of people and sensitize them for this project, is this something that you will build upon? Is this basically now a building block, basically, for you as a storyteller, producer, and director?
Yes, well, I continue to work on the environmental side. I think that we as filmmakers, we have a tremendous power and a tremendous responsibility that comes with that power. And I think a lot of filmmakers, platforms, and TV channels are not using that correctly. I strongly believe that the responsibility of a filmmaker, of a platform, of a television, is to broadcast content that has some kind of positive effect, and that so far is not really happening. I mean, there's a lot of discussion about trying to be green and green shooting that I'm sure we'll touch on and all that, but reality, you put on what is broadcast and what people are watching, and there's not that much that reflects what the public opinion feels, because the public opinion is really behind the green movement. We have to change things, but you watch the television channels and it's not there. No? So, and the other thing that I learned is that just by clicking on a web, that doesn't really mean you've helped. And that is a very dangerous thing that we realized when doing this campaign. No? We had millions of people just saying, okay, I helped. I said, I put my name and I said, boom, wow, now I feel great, I'm such a cool person. No, you have. It doesn't. I mean, yes, it's good to do it, but that doesn't mean that you have helped make the change. No, the change has to be on an ongoing basis every day, and it has to be part of everybody. It's not only the individual, but the corporations. I think that there's a lot of focus on individuals. And even when we talk about green shootings, on the producer saying, you have to be green shooting and no plastic on your set and all that. I'm a producer, I'm doing that on a regular basis. But I find again, kind of to turn around the camera and look at my client, why do I have to use and bear the cost of a green shooting, or be the one that I have to put forward the content being green, when my ultimate user, which is the television or the platform, is not doing the same? And why are they not doing that? That is my big question, and I think that is crucial for this to have an effect. Everybody has to be involved at every level, not only the individuals.
Absolutely. And I think, Lucy, just by seeing you are nodding, you are very much in agreement. In the article you wrote, Lucy, in the wake of the climate crisis, can our stories stay the same? You ask if our understanding of the world and our place in it is completely overturned. Do we have to overturn the way we tell stories? You believe in using established storytelling recipes to talk about the climate, but you also stress over and over that we are in desperate need for alternatives, for exploding the norms, as you said, for otherness. How do you advise fellow scriptwriters to construct their stories and to find new ways of expression? And how might comedies, which is where your heart is, help us to get the message across?
It's so basically what happened to me was that when I started thinking about the climate, I realized that there was this clash between our stories and the fact that my entire world had changed. Like, everything I held for certain was not certain anymore. And I was like, we're changing the way we farm, we're changing the way we think about politics, we're changing all that, and yet we're keeping those recipes that are working. And so that's kind of how it all came about. And then I realized that it was really exciting. And I guess I don't have a recipe, but that's also what's great. And it's about maybe going to definition of the storyteller that's more ancient, of like being part of your community and being on the lookout for stories that come to you. And I know it sounds a bit hippy-dippy, but kind of like being like hearing the world around you and hearing like earth cries and people's cries, and kind of being like, this is what I'm hearing, this is what I'm feeling, and I'm going to express it, and then try and find the right methods for each story that is right. And it's really hard, and it's really frustrating, because we are going to fail, because we've come up with all these great ways of telling stories, and I have an instinct that it erases so many other stories that we can't tell in this way. And I think, going to comedy, for what you were saying, comedy, there are loads of things that work really well, and we should use them. And comedy has this wonderful thing, I think, for the climate, that is that in a joke you can hold a contradiction, and we're full of contradictions when it comes to the climate. And in a joke you can obviously not be preachy, but also go to a truth that is much harder hitting without hitting too hard. And it's really hard to explain the way comedy works, and it's always surprising. But yeah, I don't have an answer, but it's kind of like listening and have faith in the fact that if you chose to be a storyteller, it's because you think you're good at it, and you should go for what you think you're good at, and trust your gut, and not erase a lot of other. I think that in our stories we just keep erasing things because we want to fit a mold, instead of listening and then finding the right way to express it. And it's really difficult. I don't know if I answered your question. I'm sorry.
You definitely did. And,
okay.
Of course, it's a process. It's a learning experience for everybody. Yeah. It was quite interesting to hear in the keynote conversation with Andy Harris that the TV stations are not so fond of this kind of climate change branded type of content. So there needs to be a kind of more subtle way to get into the narratives, get into ordinary settings, ordinary stories, and to make probably the climate challenges we are experiencing just a normal topic, and not an extra type of film, I suppose.
Mm.
Very good. So that brings me to our artist, to Patrick. You actually are in post-production of your second film in your trilogy, The Two Faces of Tomorrow, which shares fascinating research on algae that can be used as food, for example, as biofuel, or to even treat Alzheimer's or Parkinson's disease and prevent cancer, which is really awesome. However, algae can also have a deadly effect on the ecosystem, as we all notice during hot summers when we go to the lakes, and those lakes are not blue anymore, they are green. Now, please tell us a little bit more about your film, which will premiere at the National Sculpture Factory, Cork, in partnership with the Cork Film Festival in November. And please also walk us through your decision-making process when you decided your narrative approach you wanted to take.
Yeah, I suppose so. The previous film I made to the film about algae was about, I suppose, the ecological landscapes of Irish bogs, and how they're very much these archives of both archaeological, geological, and also then ecological knowledge. But that work was kind of quite poetic, and it was a very softly political work. And so coming out of that project straight into the pandemic, I just felt like we were at this moment where the crises were not improving, but only deepening with every minute. And so I really felt like I wanted to now, in the follow-up work to this, really put the politics to the front and center of the work, and I guess be much more direct in this critique of fossil fuel capitalism and also green capitalism as well, that I was sort of hinting at in the film about the Irish bogs and these archaeological bog bodies that are buried in them. And so I had quite a lot of leftover kind of ecological research from that project that I started to develop then and flesh out into this, what you would call, an experimental documentary fiction film about algae and how they've shaped all life on the planet from the deep past through to the near future. And so, the film is in post-production at the moment. It's has to be finished in 2 weeks, so it's a bit intense at the moment, and it's quite hard to reflect on a project, I think, when you're quite still buried in it, and to really take a step back and realize what it is. But essentially it just follows this fictional researcher as this guide through all these locations that somehow intersect with the story of algae. So we open with the Roman baths in Bath, which have to be drained and cleaned every 6 weeks to prevent a toxic algal bloom. We then go to, as you mentioned, cutting edge algae biofuel laboratories, which are trying to kind of develop commercial jet engine fuel from algae, because the majority of the world's crude oil reserves are just algae compacted and transformed over millions of years. And so today we can speed up that process by cultivating algae and then cracking open the cells to release the oil content. And then we also, we move to collections of fossils in the Natural History Museum, and then also we visit a Mars rover testing site, which becomes kind of a proxy for looking at the future of algae, where scientists are kind of predicting it will be a future food sustainable in space flight. But then as the researcher kind of uncovers all of these different links, they then kind of start to unravel this really complicated relationship between capitalism and algae, and then algae and the earth, and then earth and humans, and how it's embedded in this vast kind of web of violence and exploitation and extraction relating to both humans and non-humans like algae that actually have all led to this current moment of crisis that we're in. And so somehow by trying to mine all of those really complex relationships, hopefully we can get to the root cause of the climate crisis and not just, a surface level band-aid through technology. It's a much more deeper structural problem that has led to this moment politically, I think. And so then it became about a problem of, well, how do you articulate these really complex ideas in a way that people want to watch, and in a way that's visually interesting? And so that's been the real challenge of this project, that while the politics are pushed to the center, it's certainly not a traditional documentary. It's still, there's this fictional voiceover, and then I've worked with this a choir called Nyx, Electronic Drone Choir, to make 5 songs that become the voice of the algae in the film that punctuate it. So it kind of attempts to bring in a kind of non-human subjectivity within the film. So that's kind of like a sweeping overview of like how I've got to this point.
Yeah, what I find really interesting and quite important is also that you do not follow this kind of, let's say, belief that technology, innovation, and whatever else will solve it, and that humans came always up with something ingenious, and ultimately we solved the problem. In this particular film, you seem to intend to question certain accomplishments and beliefs, and to leave the audience in this process of evaluating and finding an own position.
Yeah, I mean, that was something that was really important, was for this fictional voice of the researcher who, as they encounter these amazing new technologies, to then kind of go beneath the surface of that. So, for instance, with biofuel, ExxonMobil has a huge media campaign that they've ran for the last few years around developing biofuel from algae, and they've put together a really slick campaign of adverts. And as we know, one of the root causes of this crisis is the relationship between the fossil fuel industry and capitalist extraction. And so the researcher then brings in this questioning of like, okay, on the surface, these technologies feel like a great innovative solution, but actually we need to go further and start looking at where the funding is coming from. I mean, in the United States, for example, a lot of the funding for biofuel research comes from the military, who are trying to have an independent oil source that is separate from the fossil fuel industry, for example. So the film constantly becomes about questioning these kind of utopian promises of technology and destabilizing them in some ways, and then looking at, well, what are the alternatives to that, I guess.
Super, thank you so much, Patrick. I have a final question for all of you. Since we are basically running out of time to debate and to discuss numbers, and in the view of today's urgency, how can we gear up in your point of view? And how do you see your role and your responsibility in this process? And just to add, what's your view basically also for the month to come with COP26 in Glasgow around the corner? What's your vision for the immediate and the longer future? And please feel free to answer as you feel. Whoever feels like starting. Melanie's nodding.
Well, I mean, it's a big question, but an excellent question. I mean, for me, imagination shapes our world, and us as storytellers have a real responsibility to enable those people that aren't heard to be heard. And I think that's a clear mandate for all of us sitting here today, talking from very different platforms. And we need to make sure the right voices are leading on this to empower the next generation of storytellers around the world to do so, and to make sure the future of our planet is expressed by creators globally. And I think in terms of COP, and COP is one moment that in time, and it will pass very, very quickly. People working in this space that have worked in this space for decades, especially in the content creation space, is that, everybody wants to make climate content. Everybody thinks it's doom mongering, but we need to have development funds. We need to make sure that there is a stage for everyone to pay for development, to pay for these stories at pace and at scale. And we need to make that commitment to funding the discovery and development of climate stories and the best tales to tell by those that need to tell it. So that's our mandate of Fingerprint, in front of and behind the camera, with a 50-50 gaze on the gender equality of the human race.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Melanie. That was a strong commitment. Awesome. Alvaro.
I think that on the industry side, as filmmakers, we have a content and responsibility. I think essentially normalizing in the same way that you don't see people smoking now, the green actions, the green way of life has to become normalized. And that's the best way to make people also become make them normal in their lives. No? In terms of the industry, obviously implementing immediately, my view would be immediately implementing a standard of green shooting, because that there's a lot of discussion about what's a green shooting or not. I think this cannot go on any longer. I think we have to implement an absolute standard where no film or production can be produced unless they are produced in a sustainable manner, and stop about all this calculator nonsense. I think somebody has to set the standard, and that's it. And the first ones to set the standard have to be the clients, the ultimate clients, which are the platforms and the televisions. And if they say, I'm not going to buy anything that is not shot within these parameters, everybody immediately will do it. This is not a question of calculators. And third, we have to be very, very, very careful with the greenwashing. I think there's a lot of money being spent in taking us in the wrong direction. Like Patrick said, no, a lot of very, very powerful corporations are using the fake green consumption habits to take us in the direction that really but that is a wrong direction, because the only way we're going to fix this is by changing the way we live. It's not about how we can keep on consuming like we are because somebody's going to put an umbrella to cover the sun. That's not the solution. The solution is you have to change the way you consume.
Very, very true. Thank you very much, Alvaro. 2 last words of wisdom from Patrick and Lucy, because we are almost wrapping, or maybe even over time.
Yeah, I'm gonna go very quickly, and like I agree with everything that's been said. Obviously, the only thing that sprang to mind for me as our role and responsibility, I guess, is kind of thinking in the long term as well. So not only immediate impact, because it takes so long to make a film, but also find a common language to talk about this new reality that's hitting us, and kind of like see ourselves as helping us as a community to make sense of what's going on so rapidly, and kind of hold hands and not hate each other and hate ourselves. And yeah, I think we have a role in that, finding a shared language.
Thank you, Lucy. Patrick.
I was going to say we just urgently need more propaganda. I think propaganda for both the green movement and the climate justice movement. I think the fossil fuel industry, for example, has had decades head start on us, and we really, really rapidly need to catch up. And storytelling, narratives, they're all such huge, important parts of changing people's attitudes and also inspiring conversations that will ultimately lead to then, I think, population scale change.
Awesome. Thank you very much. With that, we all turn into activists right away with our little pamphlets ready to go. Thank you so, so very much for sharing your expertise and insight, for taking the time to join us today. And now let's all return, please, to the main stage and the final closing panel, which hopefully hasn't started yet, but will start very, very soon. It was a pleasure. See you soon. Bye-bye.